All right, hello, Dr. Mashburn again, and moving right along with our lab for the muscles. We're going to continue with the muscles of the upper limb. So we're going to talk about the arm and the forearm. So remember, your upper limb is going to be what we would call your arm, but technically your arm is going to be your upper arm, and then uh, down here is your forearm. So let's start with the muscles that are the very superior, or I guess most proximal muscle. That would be the deltoid. And so this would be your deltoid muscle. And it's called the deltoid because it looks like a triangle. So think of Delta Airlines. The logo for them is a triangle. So the delta is a triangle. So that's the name of the muscle, how it gets its name. And what it does is the prime mover of arm flexion. So flexion is when you raise your arms up, and so it's the prime mover that does all that. And so if you look at the origin is going to be up here near the scapula, and the insertion is going to be on the humerus. So if you'll look at these fiber directions, as those muscles, fibers shorten, it will pull the arm up, okay? So it's going to be elevation of the arm and also abduction of the arm. So it will pull your arm out to the side and up. So elevation and abduction of the arm. And so if it pulls your arm up, that's going to mean it's the antagonist. It's antagonistic to the latissimus dorsi. So remember, in your butterfly stroke, the deltoid brings your arm up, and the latissimus dorsi brings your arm back down. The next muscle is going to be your biceps brachii, and this is the biceps brachii. And the reason it's called the biceps has two heads. So if you'll look, it almost looks like there's this is the biceps right here, biceps brachii. It almost looks like there's two muscles. So it looks like two muscles kind of smashed together to make one. So that's why you have to add that little S there. So two-headed muscle. And it's in the front of the upper arm, and its job is to flex the elbow. So think of a bicep curl. So if you're going to curl something like when you're lifting weights, that's flexion of the arm. The origin is in the scapula, and the insertion is in the radius. And so think about these muscles. Typically, there's going to be a joint between the origin and the insertion, because if there wasn't, then you wouldn't have movement. So the elbow joint is going to be between the origin and the insertion. So as you're learning these muscles, pay attention to where the joint is, and it will be between the origin and the insertion, and that is how you get the actual movement. The next muscle is called the triceps brachii. So we're going to look at the posterior view, and triceps, three-headed. So you have 1, 2, 3 heads of the triceps brachii, and so its origin again is on the scapula, and the insertion is down on the radius, and so it extends the elbow, so it straightens your arm back out. So the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii are going to be antagonists. Okay, they do the opposite motion. So when you're lifting your curl, when you're lifting the weights up, that's your biceps brachii. When you release and let your arm back down, that's the triceps brachii. And so those are two antagonistic muscles. Now your next muscle of the upper arm is your brachialis. Is your brachialis, and it is this muscle right here. Like it's kind of underneath the biceps brachii. And I've got some better pictures. I'll show you that it's kind of a sandwich muscle. It's the muscle that's kind of sandwiched between the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii. And so a side view is really a better way to show it. So I'll show it to you on one of the muscle models. Again, I call it the sandwich muscle because it lies underneath or between the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii. And its job is to flex a pronated arm. And so a pronated arm means your hand is facing down. And so if you were to take your arm and face your hand down and then bring that up to your forehead like a salute, that would be flexing a pronated arm. Okay, so that's what the brachialis does. The brachioradialis, this is the brachioradialis. So it starts in the arm and goes all the way down to the radius. Another one you have to know the origin, insertion, and action of. The origin is the distal lateral humerus, so the origin is going to be up in here, and the insertion is going to be the styloid process of the radius bone. And what it does is it helps supinate your palm. So it's going to make sure that your hand is in anatomic position. So supination is with your palms up. So it helps supinate and also helps flex the elbow. So it aids in flexion and supination. All right. And then the last muscle is going to be your pronator teres, and that's going to be right here. And the pronator teres is what, because it's pronate, pronator means to turn your palm down, and to teres means to the earth, so it turns your palm to the earth, so that's what pronates your hand. So that means it is an antagonist to the brachioradialis, and it's a synergist with the brachialis. All right, so again, so as you're looking at these muscles, you can actually feel your pronator teres and brachioradialis. If you'll take your arm, your thumb, and to kind of pronate and supinate your hand, you can actually feel those muscles working as they pull your thumb over and right back as you're pronating and supinating your hand. You can kind of feel those muscles working near your elbow. All right, so I wanted to show you kind of an isolated version of the biceps brachii, just so you could see kind of what those two heads and the origin insertion look like. So again, you've got these two heads, and you can't really see it in the other picture because they're covered up with muscles. So this gives you a really good idea of what those two heads look like, and also where the insertion is. And again, that's going to be across a joint. So again, as you're thinking about these muscles, think about the joint that they're crossing, because that will help you figure out what the movement is. We talked about the joints in the bone unit, and we talked about, you know, which joints do what. So if you know what the joint does, if you know that the elbow flexes and extends and pronates and supinates, you can tie that to the muscles that do that action. So again, this helps you tie the previous unit to this unit, because we always want to bring information forward and start thinking and tying these things together, making those connections. All right, and the last muscles of the arms are your flexors and extensors. And so we have flexor and extensor carpi and flexor and extensor digitorum. So carpi means wrist and digitorum means fingers. And so your flexors, that's what's going to bend your fingers. So when you bend your fingers, you're flexing your fingers. And when you've kind of flex your wrist or bend your wrist back toward you, that is a flexion of the wrist. And these are all going to be on the anterior side of your forearm. So on the exam, I don't make you learn each individual flexor muscle. Again, you have several flexor carpi and several flexor digitorum, so there's more than one of each one of these. What we do for this particular exam is I'll say, name this muscle group that moves the wrist, or name this muscle group that moves the fingers. So if you're on the anterior side and it says moves the fingers, you would say flexor digitorum. If you're on the anterior side and say name this group of muscles that move the wrist, it would be flexor carpi. If you're going to go into occupational therapy, then you will need to spend more time learning each individual muscle. But for this level, we're only going to use these group names, so flexor carpi and flexor digitorum. Here's another picture of the pronator teres and the brachioradialis. So this is an even better view of those muscles that are important in pronation and supination. You have extensor carpi and extensor digitorum as well. And so this is looking at the back of the posterior side of the hand. So if you were to kind of flex your wrist back up and kind of, or extend your wrist back up, kind of bend it backwards, would be a good way to describe it in layman's term, bend it backwards. That would be your extensor carpi, and they're going to be in your forearm. And then the ones that will straighten your fingers. Okay, so extend your fingers means to straighten your fingers. That's the extensor digitorum. Okay, so again, these are group names. I'll say name these muscles that move the wrist or move the fingers, and if you're on the posterior side, those are your extensors. Now, I think what's really interesting, a lot of people think you do have a lot of muscles in your hand. I'm sorry, let me go back. But these are the ones that allow your fingers to separate and come together, abduct and adduct your fingers, and then kind of your grasping in your palm kind of fingers, or your grasping muscles are in your palm. But the muscles that actually move your fingers, so if you want to bend your fingers, that's actually going on in your forearm. And so when you're flexing and extending your fingers, I want you guys to take your hands and feel on your forearm, and as you flex and extend your fingers and flex and extend your wrist, you should actually be able to feel those muscles moving in your forearm. So again, the muscles that control your fingers and wrist are actually in your forearm and not in your fingers. If someone has carpal tunnel, there's actually a piece of connective tissue that kind of wraps around. Here you go, right here. That wraps around near the wrist area. And so you can see all of these tendons, these white lines, these tendons have to fit through that small little space. So if you do repetitive motion and you're, moving your fingers and wrists a lot, it'll kind of slide and scrape against that little piece of connective tissue and become inflamed. And that's what they're talking about when they talk about carpal tunnel syndrome. All right, so just again, we'll go over these muscles using the models. This would be your biceps brachii, and then just kind of peeking out on either side, that's your brachialis, okay? Here's your pronator teres. This is your brachioradialis right here. These are going to be your flexors, and again, either going to be flexor carpi or flexor digitorum, based on whether or not it's your arm, your wrist, or your fingers. This would be your deltoid here, your deltoid here. This is that brachialis. Again, you can kind of see it's a little sandwich muscle between the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii on the back. Here's your brachioradialis right here. And you can usually see your brachioradialis, especially if you kind of wiggle your thumb and you kind of feel up in your forearm. A lot of times you can feel that brachioradialis moving as you supinate and kind of wiggle your thumb. You may see it on a diagram. So again, here is the brachialis kind of peeking out behind the biceps brachii, the triceps brachii on the back side. I really like these arm models. These are probably the best ones. And so if you're looking at the arm, here would be your deltoid. This would be your biceps brachii, and then underneath that would be your brachialis. And then on the back side, it's going to be your triceps brachii. This is your pronator teres right here. This is your brachioradialis right here. Again, these are going to be your flexor muscles. If we flip the arm over and look at it from the back side, kind of an outside or lateral view, this will be your deltoid. Here's that brachialis, my sandwich muscle. Here's your triceps brachii here and your biceps brachii here with your brachialis sandwiched in between. You have your brachioradialis kind of coming across this way, and then you have your extensors on this side. And so this is a little blown up version of that as well, with your triceps here, your brachialis here, and then your biceps would be right there. And this would be your deltoid and your brachioradialis and your extensors. Okay, and again, you may see it on a diagram. So this would be your pronator teres, and then your brachioradialis would be here, and then these are going to be your flexor muscles. So again, make sure you're taking time to look at these labeled diagrams and models. Again, take some time to watch the video with Ms. Graham, and I think you guys will do just fine. So again, this is on the posterior side, so these are going to be your extensor muscles on this side. Alright, so that's all I'm going to do with the arm. So just take some time and look at your own arm and practice knowing which muscles work together, which are your agonists, which is your antagonists. Make sure you've got your lab guide with you. Practice learning the movements, because the action terms, what the muscles do, that's going to be on your lecture exam, but you need to be able to locate them on your lab exam. Alright, thank you very much. I'll see you in the next video.